Sybil Shainwald, you've been quoted as saying that you were born a feminist. Today, at the age of 90, with your life and work dedicated to women's health reform and social justice, you're a testament to that. You taught public school, married the love of your life, Sydney Shainwald, raised 4 children, and then earned a master's in history at Columbia University. Your family marched for civil rights and women's rights, and you were an early member of NOW. You won a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities to found the Consumer Studies Center for Consumers Union at the age of 40. But at the same time, you made a life-altering decision. You enrolled at New York Law School as a night student, and voila! At the improbable age of 48, you earned your law degree and went on to help change the world for women. Question: why did you decide to be an attorney, and how hard was it to get into law school?
I decided to become a lawyer a long time before I went to New York Law School. There was a joint program at Columbia. I was getting my PhD in history, and I went over to the law school because they did have a joint program with the graduate school. And the dean of the law school said, "You will take the place of a man who will practice for 40 years. Luckily, I've been practicing for more than 40 years. I found out then that my daughter's 5th grade teacher was going to law school at night. And I called her, and I said, "How do you go to law school at night?" And she said, "Oh, tomorrow is the last day for taking the LSATs." So I left a note for my husband, "Gone to Princeton, be back when I'm back." And I applied to one law school because I thought that why waste your money on an application? So I went to New York Law School at night while I had this wonderful grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities.
How hard was it to get into law school?
Well, I did not get into Columbia, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer because I thought that law would, I could make the most change through the practice of law, the kind of practice that I wanted.
And what exactly was the focus of your law practice from the start?
I started in a firm, and I was the only woman, and I was not paid. It was like Sandra Day O'Connor and Scalia. They both graduated at the same time. She couldn't get a job. I couldn't get a job. And we both decided to take space. I didn't exactly get to where she was, but I did the best. I asked if I could take space in this law firm where there were only men. And they said, "Yes, we don't usually do that, but we'll do it for you." And of course they called me sweetheart.
At that time, what was the attitude of the pharmaceutical industry toward women's health?
I don't think it's changed that much. Women were, it was women who were experimented upon by the pharmaceutical industry. It was women who had diethylstilbestrol. It was women who wore the Dalkon shield. It was women who used Depo-Provera and Norplant. I mean, these are untested products. DES was totally ineffective, totally useless, and had not been tested. And the reason that was given by the Food and Drug Administration was it was too hard to test these drugs. So they tested, for example, later on male mice. So there was a bias in gender testing. And I asked them why they were doing that, and of course I did my usual citizen's petition. So they said female mice have hormone systems, and it was too expensive for the pharmaceutical companies to test on female mice. But the Dalkin Shield was not tested. DES was never tested. Now, DES was given to 6 million American women and resulted in terrible injuries.
And I understand it was a carcinogen as well.
It was a carcinogen and a teratogen, in other words, causing birth defects.
And you won that case, and that was a landmark case, the first, I understand, against Eli Lilly.
It was Joyce Bickler against Eli Lilly, and it was the first DES case. I do not think the men in the office wanted to take it to trial because they thought it was a loser. Anyway, we had a very smart judge in the Bronx, Judge Freeman, and the point was to prove that the problem with that case, and why it's a history really is in law books today, is because it was the first mass tort case tried on a non-identification theory. I could not prove that it was Lilly's product. And usually you would, if you have an accident with your car, you have to say whether it's a Ford or a GM or whatever. But there was no way to prove that this was Lilly's pill. So I had one sentence in the complaint, and the judge, he said, well, we will use the plaintiff's complaint and take the theory of concerted action. So what I had to prove was that the drug industry acted together to put a defective product on the market.
Then there was your suit against A.H. Robbins. That's the one about the Dalkin Shield, which was, I believe, an intrauterine device to prevent pregnancy. How did that go?
I call it the war on the womb. Dalkin Shield was tested on baboons, where baboons are the closest to humans. And I think 7 out of the 9 baboons died, but that did not give A.H. Robbins any pause. The Dalkin Shield was used all over the world, and finally the FDA ordered it to be removed from the bodies of women in the United States, but not worldwide. So it was a defective device to begin with. And one of the advertisements said that it was for the forgetful woman. So if you forgot to take your birth control pill and you had the Dalkin Shield in you, you were fine.
Tell us about your suit against A.H. Robbins about the Dalkin Shield, an intrauterine device to prevent pregnancy.
Well, contraceptive development has always meant drugs for women and devices for women. We pay with our tax dollars for the research and with our lives for the results. What we often don't know is the amount of research and the results of the research. We assume that the data on major health products are indeed safe and effective, and that is often not true. Dr. J. Robert Wilson stated at the first International Conference on Intrauterine Contraception, if we look at this from an overall long-range view, these are things I never said out loud before, and I don't know how it's going to sound. Perhaps the individual patient is expendable in the general scheme of things, particularly if the infection she acquires is sterilizing but not lethal. It I think they had 9 baboons that they studied, and 8 baboons died. But that didn't give the company any pause.
Well, then you had another case against Wyeth Erst, makers of Norplant. What was Norplant?
Norplant was a long-acting contraceptive.
It was an implant, was it not?
Well, there were 5 hormonal sticks, little sticks. So you had to have surgery to put them in and surgery to take them out. But, you know, I think that they were used for population control, and they were certainly not safe when they were marketed. It was the same. The appropriate research was not done, and actually, Norplant was used mostly in the Third World. I testified against the use of all of these products at the, well, not DES because I didn't know that much about it, but every other product at the Food and Drug Administration. And it, you know, as a consumer representative. But of course, the corporations had the power to get all of these ineffective, useless, unsafe products passed by the Food and Drug Administration. All these dangerous and defective devices were aimed at women.
You educated women about their own health, but especially about Depo-Provera, which was made by Upjohn. What was Depo-Provera?
Depo-Provera was another contraceptive made by Upjohn, untested, and it was I think a 3-month contraceptive.
Was this given by injection?
Injection. You know, going back to Norplant, women do not space their babies 5 years apart, generally speaking. And that was supposed to be a 5-year contraceptive. But these were used on women. The guinea pigs were the women in Puerto Rico and in Bangladesh and in developing countries.
Well, Depo-Provera, I understand, was actually banned, but they continued marketing it for 10 years, I heard, in 80 foreign countries.
That's right.
And that was fairly typical of what they would do with a banned drug?
Unfortunately, yes, because I would say that in most third world countries, all third world countries really, the equivalent of what the Food and Drug Administration is here was weaker. There were poor safety laws. There was no information for women, and they were just told that this was an effective contraceptive.
You are proud of your work as chair of the Women's Health Network. Tell us about their mission and their various conferences in this country, in Atlanta, Appalachia, in Boston. Could you talk a little bit about those?
I was chair for 6 years, and it was the only organization devoted to women and health. As far as the conference in Appalachia, that was called Rural Pathways. And these women came from all around and hopefully left the conference with more information about their health and what products were out there and what products they should not use and what they could do. And they could always contact the National Women's Health Network for further information, which they did.
In Boston, you did a Speak Out on Abortion.
Yes. It was the first speak out, I think, on abortion. It was like the early 80s.
And in Atlanta, there was a Black Women's Health Conference.
The Black Women's Health Project grew out of the National Women's Health Network. Billie Avery came to me and she said that she would like to have a separate organization. And I thought that was fine because I think women need to identify with other women who have the same problems. And so we talked about it, and we decided to have this conference in Atlanta, at Spelman College, actually. And I was the only white face, but it was very, very good. So that grew into the Black Women's Health Organization.
And you did some traveling around the world in order to educate women. Even you were in Africa, were you not?
I was in Africa, yes, at the Conference on Women, and I gave 4 workshops there. And one of them was on the Dalkin Shield. And so a Sister Bernhain Chichi came up to me and she said she ran a women's health clinic in Ethiopia. So she said to me, I'd like you to represent me in the United States. And I said, do you have your Dalkin Shield? You still have your Dalkin Shield? And she said, yes. So I said, I cannot represent you unless you have your Dalkin Shield removed. I said, but you are the head of a clinic. And if you write me a letter and tell me that you have had it removed, and you have had every woman in Ethiopia had it removed, then I will represent you.
And did she?
She did, and she sent me 2 ivory bracelets, which I know I should.
Of the thousands.
I represented the women of Bangladesh.
Oh.
Also.
Could you talk about that?
I represented the women of Bangladesh in the Dalkin Shield litigation. A man called me up and he said to me, would I represent the women of his country against A.H. Robbins? And I said, sure. So I filed these cases in Richmond, Virginia, and the clerk of the court called me and said, Mrs. Shainwald, we can't read the addresses, so we won't be able to give these women any money. So I called Farhad, who was my contact in Bangladesh, and I said, can you come over to the United States next week? We have to go to Richmond to put addresses on these the papers I had filed, because the papers that I had received from them said addresses were 3 steps to the left of the concrete block. And so he came, we went to Richmond, we straightened out everything, and every woman in Bangladesh received money. And I'm happy to say that my picture hangs in Dhaka.
I heard it hangs all over Bangladesh. That's what I've been told.
Well, that's even better.
Of the thousands, yes, thousands of cases you've won, which were your most important successes?
The most important case I had was Bipla v. Lilly, because it was the first DES case, and it was really an important case. I mean, 6 million women in this country were given an unsafe, untested drug. I still, at my age and stage, am representing clients whose mother took the drug and whose daughters were injured.
So from all of that work you've done, what has given you the greatest personal satisfaction?
I think bringing justice. I hope that I have brought some justice and compensation and to these women around the world, and also that I've helped to change the law.
And where do you feel you made the most lasting difference?
I think changing the law in New York State. For example, one of my clients, the law was that if you reached a majority, 21 years old, you could not bring a case. And women who were exposed to DES were 25, they were 30, and so I decided that I should change the law and make it into a discovery statute. It took about 5 years to do that, I would say. So Governor Mario Cuomo signed the law, gave my client the pen, and I ran around the corner and filed the first DES case in New York. But also it revived, for 1 year, it revived cases that had been dismissed on the basis of the statute. So all of those women who had been turned out of court could sue and receive some compensation for their devastating injuries.
In the matter of choice, what do you fear most about the future of abortion?
Well, I must say that I don't think that a lot of people know that abortion did not start, the right to an abortion, the right to choice, did not start with Roe v. Wade. At the beginning of this country, women were free to get abortions. And it wasn't until doctors, I would say probably in the mid-19th century, started to practice and perform abortions, that it was medicalized. Other than that, there were midwives, and what did we do before, before that? Anyway, as I stated before, abortion was easy to access and part of our culture. And now we have all of these restrictive, more and more restrictive laws. We have heartbeat laws, so that when the baby's heart, in some states, when the baby's heart can be heard, you can't have an abortion after that. Now that's very early. We have some states that have laws that ban abortion from conception. It's more and more restrictive. I received something today. A federal appeals court just held that abortion providers have no constitutional protections. So do I fear for abortion? Yes. I do fear for it because of the justices. The justices have changed on the Supreme Court. Brett Kavanaugh's record is not a good record on the issue, no matter how he testified before Congress. And if President Trump can appoint any more justices, I do fear that Roe v. Wade may be overturned.
As a dedicated chair of the Women's Health Network, member of NOW, and the Veteran Feminists of America, what would you say today to encourage young feminists?
I would say go to law school.
Will they let them in?
They let them in now. When I went to law school, 3.6% of my class, whatever number that is, were women. It was much more difficult for women to go to law school and to become lawyers, and certainly to go into practice.
And to go back and to conclude, when you applied for law school at the age of 40, you were told that you were too old for a full practicing life. Today, nearly 50 years later, still going strong, you've proved them wrong. Congratulations and thank you to a fabulous feminist.
Thank you. That's a great compliment.